The French package deal was not announced clearly. So what we have are narratives of the deal. So far, we've seen two pillars of the French initiative. The first one is a national unity government from inside the political class. And that's a considerable change from the kind of politics that we've seen after 17 October, when having someone from the political class inside the government was seen as a problem, given the level of demonstrations, the protests, etc. So an independent government was required back at the time, but now the French initiative is going back to the pre-17 October type of politics, which is, let's have a national unity government backed by all the political parties to implement reforms. Secondly, an early elections, and that means, of course, not this year, given the COVID-19 situation in Lebanon, which is deteriorating as we speak. The elections would be held next year, and the national unity government would be overseeing the elections and also implementing the reforms required by the IMF and also by the previous CEDR conference, donors conference. And after Lebanon succeeds in winning an IMF or having an IMF, securing an IMF deal, Lebanon, France, and also the allied Arab states would help Lebanon get a wider package of financial aid. Never ever in Lebanon's history of forming governments have we seen a very quick government. The French president has clearly stated that he wants this government by early the 1st of September, and this gives us a few weeks, which is to a certain extent difficult in a country like Lebanon, where external interferences and internal divisions clearly hinder the process. And so we haven't seen a consensus outside, among the external actors who are influential in Lebanon, specifically speaking about Saudi Arabia, which doesn't seem to be on board with the French initiative. This might derail the process a bit longer, but also the fact that the internal divisions are not resolved. We are seeing clearly an opposition to some of the figures that Hezbollah might accept, and also the other side would reject any candidate seen as acceptable by Hezbollah. And so, you have very clear divisions, and add to that the complexity of next week's verdict by the STL, the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, which is expected to accuse and a verdict which is expected to point fingers at Hezbollah members. And the fact that that Hezbollah members might be implicated will further complicate the political process here in Lebanon. And speaking about a national accord or a national unity government means that such massive differences and such divisions among the Lebanese political class might be might hinder such a process. The interesting thing about the French initiative is the Egyptian backing behind of it, which made many think of the politics in Libya, and that the same external roles in Libya are being defined along the same lines, along the same dividing lines as in Lebanon. Along with the French initiative, we're hearing of fears of a Turkish role in Lebanon, a Turkish involvement in Lebanon. And so the question is, to what extent, will these new fault lines define Lebanese politics here? I mean, Lebanese politics have always been defined in the past 15 years or more by the pro-Iran, pro-Syria bloc, which is represented and led by Hezbollah and its allies, and on the other end, the pro-Western and the pro-Saudi Arabian bloc, which is led by Jumblat, Hariri, Ja'ja, etc. All of these major political leaders being aligned along these two fault lines. And now these new fault lines, speaking increasingly about a Turkish role looming in the horizon, is that a new defining fault line? Because that would further complicate the situation in Lebanon, or perhaps make it easier, given that having an anti-Turkish or an anti-Turkish position in Lebanon might, or an anti-Turkish and pro-French position might be an easier fix to Lebanon's external issues. But having said that, I think now the old fault lines are more important, and this is why I think the French initiative is being delayed. Given the French initiative, one big question that is looming over Lebanese politics is whether the old fault lines still matter. Does it still matter that Hezbollah's arsenal is still in place? Does it still matter that Hezbollah is seen as a major menace to Lebanon's foreign policy, to Lebanon's relations with the external world, and also to peace and war? The fact that there's a party which holds the keys to peace and war in Lebanon, which is outside the elected institutions. How long will these questions? How would the French initiative and also the attempt to redefine the fault lines in Lebanon matter when it comes to the big questions which defined Lebanon's politics in the past 10, 15 years? So I think, the French initiative, it further complicates things, but also raises a lot of questions about new alliances formed in the region and their implications on Lebanese politics, a country where external matters as much as the internal.